Welcome to the podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time, a CatSource production. In this episode, I chat with Chris Colbert, CEO at DCP Entertainment. Chris specializes in managing high-profile partnerships and molding content from conception to implementation. He is all about content, especially the kind of content that resonates with underrepresented communities. With experiences to share and a vision that inspires, let's welcome Chris Colbert. This episode exists because of CatSource. CatSource is your content team. You know how many business leaders need help communicating their story? That's what we do. Content strategy, creation, and distribution for business leaders. This provides opportunities, relationships, and a platform for you and your business. Why do we do this? Because at CatSource, we exist to help you create and share amazing content. And yes, you should have a podcast. We'll help you. Learn more by visiting kescontent.com. It's always funny though, because when you talk to founders, entrepreneurs, or just in general, business leaders, you always hear this thing like overnight success, and you watch these people have success. And it's always funny. It's like, yeah, it's a 20-year overnight success. And I look at you, Chris, and I see like a many project, many years overnight success, right? Because I see all these different projects that you've done and have gone through and kind of iterated. You've gone through these different processes. And as a creative and as a thinker and as someone who's trying to develop stuff, it's inspiring. It's also, I like being around those types of people. And that's why it makes sense for us to chat. And that's really getting things started. How do you look at it? Like, how do you look back and say, man, through all these different projects and all these different businesses and these different people that I've met, now here I am, and you're still working for more stuff. So it's not like you even consider yourself, well, I've arrived. Well, you've arrived, but you just keep going.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for everything you just said. Like, that was extremely kind. And I'm going to have you put that on a voicemail for me.
That's right. Yeah.
No, and I appreciate you even having me on this show. Like, the level of people you've had on the show to then have me included in that, it's very special for me as well. So, again, I just want to say thank you, first of all. To answer your question, I guess what I think on when I look back at it is like, damn, I'm getting old. Sorry, I don't I look at my resume a bit and I'm like, wow, I forgot that all this stuff happened. I legitimately forget what I've accomplished because I'm constantly living in the moment and thinking about what's next. And so I guess that's what keeps my drive. I'm constantly focused on what I haven't accomplished and what I want to accomplish and what I want to help others accomplish. That I sometimes, and this is not necessarily a great thing all the time, I sometimes forget successes that I've had in the past. So it's a good thing because it keeps you motivated, but it can be bad because you can sometimes not revel and enjoy the success that you've already had. So it's, like I said, a good and a bad thing. And I'm working on that back now.
Yeah. Well, there's something about not having to look back because there's multiple things you can look back on. You can look back on like, well, look at the success that I've had, right? Or you can look back at troubling times, and both can be crippling in a way and it can hold you back. And we always hear like, you can't look back and you also can't look forward. You can't look too far ahead. You can't get ahead. I always hear you can't get ahead of your skis, right? And you're going to tumble over. And it's hard, and as I think as someone who's thinking about things the way you do and the way I do, it's a challenge at times. Sometimes you can envy the people that just figure it out. Like, I can just always be in the moment. And that's something that seems like you've been able to do is not get too far ahead of yourself for the successes you've had. And possibly at the same time, I'm guessing that along the way, you've run into challenges and things didn't always go according to plan. And it wasn't the way it was supposed to be. And perhaps you dealt with it and you go through it. But do you think about things like that as well? I mean, maybe not on a daily basis, but you're having this conversation with me and you talk about all the good things in the past, like this overnight success that we talked about, many years, many projects, but also the challenges that you've had along the way, like learning from them. But there's a lot in there that you could always go back on and it could frustrate you.
Yeah. And I think part of that looking back perspective has given me perspective on some of the things that others might see as failure. Like, I've never really looked at anything in my career and seen that I've failed at anything. I once made a statement to somebody, not realizing how profound it was. They actually had to point out how profound it was to me, where I said, I've never actually failed at anything. Things haven't always necessarily gone the way I had envisioned them to, but I never failed because what some people see as failure, I see as an opportunity to learn. So I was very fortunate that my first ever working within the radio career, within the audio media landscape, was working for Sirius XM Radio and helping to create Jamie Foxx, Academy Grammy Award winner Jamie Foxx's radio station, The Foxhole. And I was doing that literally as a senior in college and was hired right out of college to then help run that channel. And so to have that kind of success early on, when you live your own life, you don't realize the magnitude of maybe some of the things that happen. So for me, it just was, oh, this is what I'm doing. But when others look at it, they see, oh, this was huge. What I see is the little things that you had said in terms of the mistakes that I made early, the kind of hours that I was working. I'm working on a channel that's based on the West Coast and I'm here on the East Coast. So I'm, working this 3-hour difference. So I'm essentially working on both coasts every single day and learning how to manage that, how to manage a team in multiple locations. And again, falling flat on your face sometimes when you do that. So I look back and see like, okay, I've made some mistakes in terms of the way to program a station or the way to run a staff, but I don't see those as failures. I see those as things where I learned from that and then never repeated that mistake, or I used it to inform how I want to manage down the road or how I want to program a station down the road. So yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've taken away as I look to the past is to realize that there's no real such thing as failure until you decide to give up. It's really just a work in progress until you put your hands up in the air, which I haven't done yet.
You seem to have a lot of alignment in what you're doing, and you probably have to because, like you said, you have the East Coast, you have the West Coast. I mean, the day doesn't stop, the night doesn't stop. Your mind probably, from what I can tell, doesn't stop. You're always thinking through things. So, and I think with alignment, it's, well, this is what I enjoy doing, and it can apply to a lot of different things. Do you find it that you have to find ways to turn it off? We always hear about like whether it's meditation, working out, going on walks, engaging in whatever fun activities you like to do. How does that work? Because it almost is an extra 3 hours each way with your time difference.
Yeah, it's really hard to turn it off. And especially when you work in the entertainment industry, when you're trying to turn it off, you accidentally turn it on. So I'll just working with Jamie Foxx. Like when I would try to go home and just watch TV or just listen to some music, then all of a sudden Blame It on the Alcohol would come on the radio station. It's like, I can't control that. But now my mind's thinking, oh, blame it. There's Jamie again. Oh, we can do this project. We can do this. And the mind just starts on its own without even really thinking about it. I'm sitting at night. It's like you're trying to wind down. You tell yourself not to think. Okay, just focus on my breathing. And it's 2 hours later and you're in this deep strategy session in your own mind about what you're going to be doing the next day or for the next month. So what I've been doing lately to try to combat that has been doing more reading or more audiobooks, things that aren't in the realm of what I produce. So we produce currently with my company, DCP Entertainment, we produce audio content for podcasts, radio, but we also do video content for YouTube, digital kind of content. So that's a lot of kind of content to try to avoid. We do audiobooks. We don't currently write books. And so that's kind of been my escape where I can usually not fall back into this work think process. I can really escape into a book or even use those books to inform maybe what my life's purpose is and how I might want to move about the world. Isn't necessarily all about my career. Maybe it's more my personal trajectory and how that might into who I am. So like books like A New Earth and Ways of the Shaman. I've been reading more spiritual type books lately.
Sure. Like what you said, you get outside of what you produce, and that's hard. I mean, I deal with that as well. I mean, because we're doing a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. We're helping people on the book side of things. We're not a publishing company, but people need to create a market for that. It's not even the market, it's the conversation that has to happen around the content, right? The content's at the core of it. So you kind of talking about that is, oh, wow, that's interesting. Get outside of what you produce. And it's still growth, like you said. I mean, you're thinking of it. It's not like you're going to read how to do something. You're actually getting deeper with it. And that all relates to the how-tos, but you're not looking for it. You're looking for it at a much deeper level. And I can understand that. When did you start coming down? That's interesting that you said that because I've had that path myself with reading, because you start going to books that are more challenging or maybe open you up. Is that a recent thing that you've dealt with? Because you said right now you're doing it. I mean, did you evolve and it's like, I'm going to read what I love until I love to read. And then you start getting down these other paths and you're choosing books that you're like, my younger self would never pick this book. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The books I just named and then Peaceful Warriors, a few other ones. Yeah. All books that I would have kicked, like 20-year-old me would have been like, what the heck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And shoved a different book or, told me to go out and play some sports or something. No, it definitely has been a new thing. It's been in this last year and even before the pandemic itself hit, but the timing kind of worked out with the pandemic as well. But yeah, the start of 2020, I just started kind of on this spiritual path. It was kind of coupled with me trying to really figure out how to have a life, career kind of separation, realizing that for now I'm almost 35 years old. For almost my entire professional life, I haven't had a good separation of personal life and business life. So I went into this year saying, okay, I need to finally get that. I've been saying I'm going to do it for years and I'm finally going to do it. And so that's where I started looking at these more spiritual books in terms of these understanding who we are as human beings, understanding why we're here on this earth, understanding our past, even beyond the things that we're reading in our history books. Let's go even beyond that to the evolution of mankind, Homo sapiens, and all these things. Okay, what is our nature as human beings? Yeah. Are we far from who we're supposed to be as entities on this earth? Like, that's kind of the new thinking I've been thinking in terms of, and part of that is, like I said, for me to take better care of myself personally, but also what I found in doing this journey, it's helped me understand human beings in general, which will tie back into the work that I do, because now I can understand at a core level who we are and how do we reach people on an emotional level, on a very structural who we are as human beings kind of level. So ultimately, it's actually probably going to help our programming as well.
Yeah, I would imagine so. There's a few names. You already said one, Jamie Foxx, and a couple of names that stood out to me, George Carlin, Richard Pryor. I'm fascinated by comedy in general because there's so much wisdom in it, and you wouldn't think there is. I mean, the way they go about like the communication, the style, the way they touch on subjects that no one would ever touch on, the depths that they can go to it. You've obviously been surrounded by a lot of different talents and at least working on their content. So whether you're with them or not with them, you're seeing it on a consistent basis. The more you watch a 1 hour stand-up, if you watch it 100 times, you're going to pull something different out of it each and every time. And sometimes it's just humorous, and other times it's like, wow, how did he get there? Like, how did you even think of that? Has that been interesting to you to go through that process, to be surrounded by these types of people, or at least be surrounded by their content?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate that a major part of my career, especially early on, was in the comedy world. My homework was going to comedy clubs around the country. So every date I ever took was the comedy clubs because we get treated like VIP, so I look fancy.
Yeah, that's right.
So that was a plus. But no, just the ability to work with comedians, I think, opens up your view of the world. And I think you get that from listening to comedy, but you get it even more so by getting a chance to talk with them behind the scenes and understand who they are. I think comedians are very special in the fact, like many artists as well, the way that they look at the world is very much different than the everyday person. They're analyzing it a different way. And that's part of what creates their comedy. They're analyzing things that you didn't pick up on, but you did notice. You noticed, but you didn't know how to put it into words. And so I think that's really special in what they do. And so it's great to be able to pick those kind of people's brains, because it gets you thinking more broadly on what's going on in the world, how we're interacting with each other. George Carlin is one of those people that was just brilliant at his way analyzing our society. Like, one of my favorite comedy bits to always draw reference to, because it's still so relevant today, is like, how do we have so many homeless people, yet we have all these golf courses that are just completely empty?
Yeah.
And I just butchered that joke completely. Go listen to George Carlin and get
No, but you just go reference it, but absolutely.
But yeah, how the hell do we have such a homeless problem? We have so much open space. And every single word, every single inflection of his comedy bits, I learned from having worked with his daughter, his older brother, his manager. Everything was practiced and was perfect. Every comedy album you've ever heard from him, the inflections were spelled out to a T, and they were there for a reason to help make a point. And I think that was something that was special about him. But I think every comedian has their little process, their thing that makes them special. And I think it's something that we, just as everyday people, can, if you're really analyzing it, it's something you can take away from to better your own life or better your career, just in terms of how they approach their comedy.
Sure. And those people that we talk about, George Carlin, obviously, and some of these other ones, they're very well represented. There's content, you can go get them at any point. People know them. You reference them for most people, they'll understand who they are. But in that too, when you go to the comedy club, well, there's so few become the Richard Pryor, become the George Carlin, right? It's like the NBA All-Star. It's like there's so few of them. And that doesn't mean the ones that don't become the most well-known aren't as impactful in whatever way they are. And you obviously saw that. So it seems to me you came down this path, you worked with all these different people, you go to the comedy club and you're like, there's some amazing people out here. And there's amazing people who aren't getting the chance for various reasons that you can touch on. And here you are saying, we want to help the underrepresented voices. We want to give them a voice. And wow, what a time it is to have a voice, because you can just have a microphone, which I have in front of me, and you can put it out there. Now, it doesn't mean everyone should do it, but if you have an opportunity and if you have an avenue and if you have people around you that say, you should lean into that and we'll help you or we'll support you or whatever that might be, man, that's powerful stuff. And so when I see that you want to help underrepresented voices, that's it, right? And so has that been that journey that I just kind of described? How did you get to that?
A bit of what you said. I think part of it came from working at SiriusXM, where I was for 11 years, but I was always looking at the totality of the media landscape. So I went to school for TV and radio. So I'd always known that the video was something I wanted to get back to. So I was always looking at what are major TV stations doing? What's going on YouTube? What's happening in these other spaces? Even with radio, what's going on in this new podcast world? So always just watching what's happening. And one thing I was noticing, and podcast was the last thing I noticed is happening within because it's the newer of the media kind of platforms. But I just saw a lack of opportunities being given. First of all, I noticed it with Black people, myself being a Black man. That's the first thing I kind of tend to notice. But then I noticed the same thing for Latino communities, for Asian communities, LGBTQ plus communities, people with disabilities, so on and so forth. These communities that not only aren't being represented as much as say, a white cis male kind of hosted show or kind of demographic, but they're also not being given the opportunities with the same kind of resources. So they're not getting the same level of marketing and press. So even if they are given a shot, they're being given less tools or less sharp tools to be able to get their job done. And then at the end of the day, when that show fails, the executives say, well, I told you that Black female hosted LGBTQ show wasn't going to work. And it's like, well, yes, it may not have worked, but you didn't give it the opportunity to succeed. And so I wanted to create a space to allow shows the opportunity to succeed. And now, like you mentioned, not every show is going to succeed. Not every host is going to be a great host. Every idea, every concept isn't going to hit at the time that you put it out. But we can at least do our effort to make sure that those opportunities are there. And also that from a listener standpoint, that your experiences are being truly reflected in the content. So there's nothing worse than having a show that's being catered to the LGBTQ community that's being put together by an all heterosexual staff. They don't understand the touch points for that community. They don't understand the way to speak to that community. And sometimes, even if they're doing it for the most altruistic reasons, they can do a disservice to that community because they don't understand the language that they use. They don't understand the cultural nuances that they need to work within so that they're not potentially hurting that community. We deal a lot in mental health. You know, when you're talking about mental health, you have to be very careful around the way that you talk about it because you could influence somebody into taking action, into taking their own life or something like that. And so I think it's a responsibility by any organization that's trying to work around underrepresented communities that they need to have those communities as a part of those conversations and creating those shows. So again, where I kind of stepped in with what we're doing and what I hope not only to do this within our own company, but hopefully we can help to change the culture with some of these other companies as well, big and small, so that they can do the same and provide the same kind of opportunities.
You obviously have to turn a profit, right? People have to make money so you can support this equipment and you can do all these different things. But you also have this, like you said it, you have this responsibility that it's represented in the right way. And I see that you probably get a lot out of this, like personally. Of course, the money side of it, that's why I started with that. But you get a lot more out of it by saying, I'm going to offer you a voice. I'm going to put you on a podcast. We're going to give you the right support system that you need. And when then you watch this thing play out, you have this sense of fulfillment for everybody involved, including yourself, to say, man, this is why I do what I do. This is bigger than anything else. Yes, the money has to be there. I get it. But this is bigger than all of that. Because when you do these things, when you talk about underrepresented voices, when you say all the different things you just said right before this, it has to lead to something like that in order for it to be that fulfilling, in order for it to last and to stay committed to it.
Absolutely. I'm very proud of all those shows that we work with. One of the first ones that we ever started doing was this show called Inner Space, which is on mental health, all situated around different aspects of mental health, whether it be you're a veteran of the armed forces, whether you are in the corporate space, in the entertainment space. We hit on all those different avenues. And I love reading the feedback from our listeners on that show in particular, because I feel like we are potentially saving lives. And I remember reading a comment, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, I saw it on one of the videos that we had of Wayne Brady and his ex-wife talking about their mental health. And Wayne really talks about, especially as a Black man, and be labeled the crazy uncle or what have you, but even just broader than just his demographic of being a Black man, he just spoke to the greater identity of how tough it is dealing with depression and anxiety. And many people can relate to that. And I saw a comment where someone said, oh, wow, Wayne is going through this. I would have never expected that. And now I feel so less alone because I didn't realize that he was dealing with this. And now I realize that I'm not the only one dealing with this as well. And so like was the purpose of that kind of show, to showcase that not only is it the everyday people who are dealing with this, the people that we look up to, that we hold on these high pedestals, are going through the same thing that we're going through. And sometimes worse because they're also on that platform and have to a certain way, even though they're struggling with something. And so I think that's the powerful nature of what we do programming wise. And that show in particular is why I'm so proud of what we've been able to put out there.
Yeah, there is, like you said, you can go through something and you can just do some research, dive into it in whatever way you do it. Like just hop on Google or you go find a podcast, you come across a podcast perhaps, and then you hear these different things. And there's obviously a lot of bad when it comes to content and social media, but there's this side of it that's so good. It's because then you can get access to it. You really, if you want to take some time to think through things, it's helpful. I'm not saying it's going to solve everything because it's up to you and it's still up to having conversations and talking to those people that you know and trust. But like you're saying, this is a gateway to the next step. It's a gateway to the listeners, but it's also this gateway to the people that you're giving that voice to at DCP Entertainment. And you're doing a lot there. Man, you have a lot going on. You go to the website and I saw that. I saw the inner space and it shows up on the podcast. What are some other projects that you're working on now that have you excited?
I say a project where she hosts a couple shows with us. Our host, Danielle Moody, she's a regular or was a regular on MSNBC. I only say was just because now with the pandemic happening, we're having a lot more doctors on the air. She's a political commentator, journalist, activist. She's somebody who I think is going to be huge. This is a name, Danielle Moody. Remember it now. This is going to be one of the biggest names in politics. And again, she gets featured regularly on MSNBC on all the different shows that they have, but she doesn't have a show that she's hosting on that platform. And so we're here able to give her a platform to do a show the way she wants to do it. And the way she does it is very raw and, there's cursing in it. It's the way that we would be talking at a bar about the current state of our politics or the upcoming election. And, that's another place where I love the feedback we get of, oh my gosh, like finally somebody said what the heck I was thinking.
Right. You're good.
So I think that's something special about that side. I come from uncensored comedy, so I never know what I'm allowed to say and not.
Yeah. It's not, you just go with it, right?
Yeah. But no, that's something where it's special to be able to be like, okay, this is this new era in media and we're championing this new voice that is perfect for this moment in our current, American history or even world history. So Danielle Moody with her show Woke AF, very aptly named, and also a show Democracy-ish that she co-hosts with Torre. And then she has another show called PM Mood, which is all about her activism side. As a host, I'm very excited about. But we also have other projects where we work on documentaries, and we're currently working on a documentary with Torre, famed journalist, another MSNBC regular, author, just all around a former TV host at MTV, VH1. We're working on a documentary called Who Was Prince? A documentary on Prince and his multiple personalities, exploring, is he a good guy with bad tendencies, a bad guy with good tendencies? Because he was just this powerful musician, rock legend, but at the same time was very private. And so it's great to be able to do a show where we can unearth new material about people that we think we already know, that we love, and again, hold up on these high pedestals, but also then to show he's just a human being. He was very much influenced by the trauma that happened early in his life. And so that influenced his trajectory in his life. And so I think that's what's special about what we're able to do in the documentary space as well, is humanizing people that we put up here as celebrities. So yeah, that's one of the upcoming projects that I'm really excited about.
When that show goes, the Prince show that you're talking about, will that be a podcast? Will it be a show? Is it a video? Where do we get that?
So it's going to be a podcast only audio documentary. We are actually in some talks about making it bigger and better. So I can't give you an exact launch date on this now.
Right.
But we do have it up on our website. So if you go to dcpofficial.com,
it'll be there.
Page and you can stay up to date on that.
Well, last thing I want to touch on, we've obviously talked about already, and the importance of having it and finding this content is this podcasting world, right? I even heard someone say, it's almost like everyone says they have a podcast now, and it's becoming, and there was an article in the New York Times that, are we at peak podcast? And I wrote something about this, and in a way we are, right? If you're expecting to become, say, the next Joe Rogan, if you're going to be a singer-songwriter, become the next Taylor Swift, it's not to say, hey, if that's your dream, go pursue it. But at the same time, there's so many different reasons to have a podcast. I've always said, if I have this conversation with you and no one ever listens to it, I still had the conversation with you. Or if the conversation was only for my team and for training to learn about, well, if you have success, don't get too caught up in yourself. And if you have failures, there's so many things that we can learn and teach internally or train our clients. But obviously, we're a big believer in podcasts. We have a few podcasts here. We help other companies do podcasts as well. It's more about giving them the opportunity to explore this and go down this path to better content. And then you get there and then you're like, well, what do you want to do with it then? I want to talk to you about podcasting though in general, because clearly you're a fan of it. You are a producer of content for podcasts. So just want to see like your current feeling on the state of podcasting today.
Yeah, I'm like you. I do think that, yeah, if you're trying to be the next Joe Rogan or what have you, I think that, yeah, there is a plethora of those kind of shows at this point. I'm going to zig what you said. So there's a lot of people doing documentary content, a lot of people now doing content that is fiction based, these scripted podcasts. We're staying away from that for the most part. We're going to find the niche that we can speak to better than anybody else and that nobody else is really caring that much about right now. And for us, that's the underrepresented communities. And though we want to change that culture, make more people focus on it, we realize that there's very few companies and independent shows and stuff that are doing that. And if they are, they're not being marketed well enough. And so if we can cut through that noise and say, hey, we're the people really championing these communities, I think that allows us to have this sustainability in the market. So from a business perspective, it makes sense what we're doing because we're focusing on the communities that nobody else is focusing on. And so that's where I see that there's opportunities. And I think that there's other companies that can come in and focus on other niches that are not really being focused on by these other entities. And I think that then lines you up if you're a creator who wants to then sell your company at some point. If you really just want to stay in the space, you have those options now because you're going to be doing something that eventually other companies are going to realize, oh, wow, they're making money catering to that community. Well, we're lazy. Let me just buy that company. So you position yourself for that as well. Or you can be very much what we're trying to do, which is, no, we just want to stay in this space and we're going to be the champion for that. And we can hopefully bring some other companies along. But we're going to make some good money because nobody else is saying, that's the community I want to speak to. And we're going to be the ones to do that first.
Yeah. And on that point that you just made, we're going to make money. We're going to stay in this lane. We're going to keep doing it. And obviously it's with being inside of that niche. Is it through advertising, sponsorship deals?
Yeah, a little bit of that, but we also keep ourselves flexible. So also can act as a production house. So even if we're not distributing the content, we can come in and help produce the content. We partnered early on last year. We partnered with a company called Mass Appeal, Endeavor Audio. Mass Appeal being Nas's entertainment company, Endeavor Audio being part of that whole WME talent agency family. And we did a documentary called Freaknik where that was all them, but they hired us as the audio professionals. They've done video documentaries, but they've never presented something in the audio space like this. So they brought us on board to help handle that. So we keep ourselves flexible. I'm one that very much is like, if there's an opportunity, I want us to be positioned to take advantage of that. And that's where I also call us a media production company and distribution company, because I don't want to just say we're a podcast company or say that we just do podcasts and video, because who knows? Augmented reality might become even bigger in the future. Virtual reality may become even bigger in the future. There may be some new technology beyond that. And I don't want to pigeonhole us into not being able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, no, I use that word opportunity. We use it all the time. And that's what it is, right? And what you do with that opportunity, you see a lot of marketing companies, it's like lead generation companies. No, it's an opportunity to present itself. And I think content is at the core of it. It is about the opportunity that's just presented in front of you. And are you nimble enough? And that's what's cool about small business and content creation is you can do those things. Like you said, if you're aware that there's different things that are going to come along the way, just like your career is taking you down these different paths. It's like, well, you could have envisioned it going a certain direction. Well, through your content, through your self-learning, different doors open up. No different than the content that the people that are creating content with you, that's going to open up opportunities for them. And it's just such a great word. But at the same time, it doesn't mean, well, there's a closed deal on the end of it. It doesn't mean you get to sell the business. It doesn't mean you get the sponsorship deal. It just means you had the opportunity. And it's sports analogy. Obviously, it's the real basic one of, were you even at bat? Did you play in the game? We always hear this one thing. It's like, you can play, you can not, or you can lose, you can win or lose, and then you can not play. So do you want to be win, lose, or not? So you know what? Have the opportunity. You might lose, but at least you got to play and you weren't sitting on the sidelines. Had the opportunity.
Yeah. And then I think that was something I learned early in my career as well when working with Jamie Foxx was prepare for the unexpected. It sounds like a weird statement to make, but the way I came about it with working with him is that he was very much off the cuff. He'll call for a song last minute and say, I want that now. And again, he was in LA, I was in New York, so I don't even have that visual with him. And he'll sometimes not even name the song. He'll just go, give me that, do, 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 do. And that's like,
oh man,
figure out what the heck that is. But when you work with that person long enough, you realize, okay, he likes certain artists. So let me always have the newest song by that artist ready. He has certain staple songs that he goes back to. Let's have those ready. Did someone release a new album this week? Okay, let's have that ready. Is there a guest coming in today? Let's make sure we have all their albums. So you prepare for the things that you can't control, but you have this inkling that, okay, it might come up. And I think it's the same thing within just business as a whole. You can't predict the future, but you can watch what's happening within the world, within your media landscape, and make preparations that you can then use if something happens. now you're better positioned to take advantage in that situation because you thought ahead when everybody else didn't. And now you're going to look so much better, or you're going to be able to take advantage of the situation. And I think to bring everything full circle, I think that's kind of what we're living in now as well with COVID-19. And yes, this is very tough what we're going through, and I don't want to downplay that at all. But if you have the ability at this moment to look at what's going on and look at where the new normal is going to take us, there's potential opportunities. And that's what I've been telling the people. I'm calling it our oligarch moment. This is where we get to really see where are the opportunities and take a hold of them. While everybody else is panicking, we can take advantage and shape this world into hopefully a world or America, our media landscape, whatever it might be. We can shape it into the way that we'd like it to be because we were able to take advantage when everybody else was looking the other way.
Yeah, that's well said. I just want to touch on one thing. I'm going to let you go. The music industry. So you're talking about SiriusXM radio. My wife, she's done some songwriting in country music and in different areas and different genres. And I know you're not necessarily perhaps in it today, but you've been around it. Do you see something? Because so much has changed. And right now we're live events, they're not happening, right? And so what's going to take place? And it seems like there's also opportunity with that, right? Just because that putting those two things together, what do you see? Or, I mean, obviously I'm not looking for prediction, but what do you see happening in and around the music industry?
Yeah, like you, I'm nervous for them in terms of live aspect. Like I've always understood that that's where a lot of entertainers really make their money because they're not getting the money on streaming, or even back in the days of selling albums, like all that was going to the bigger media companies or the music companies that were putting it out. So I'm concerned for the artists themselves, but I do think that this is an opportunity where they may be able to shift into really taking more ownership of their content and how they're delivering it to people. I see virtual reality maybe bridging that gap. I remember kind of leading up to this, seeing advertisements for basketball games where you can put on your little Oculus headset or whatever your VR situation is and watch courtside at a basketball game. I think that same kind of technology is what we're going to be looking at for concerts. Now, I don't necessarily know exactly how that all plays out, but that's kind of what I'm looking at, seeing like, okay, how are people going to be experiencing the same things at home?
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. I appreciate all your insights and your passion for this business and your constant drive to create more content and help other people do the same thing. How do people learn about the work that you're doing, DCP Entertainment, and everything else you have going on?
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. You can find us dcpofficial.com. So D as in David, C as in Charlie, P as in Paul, official.com. We're same thing on all social media. So DCP Official. Find us Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And yeah, we can always stay up to date with us there. Though we have a decent amount of programming now, we got a lot more that we're rolling out next year and hopefully years to come.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, best of luck to you. I hope we get to stay in touch and learn more about what you have going on. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you again for having me.
One of my favorite things about CADSource is the opportunity to chat with amazing business leaders and entrepreneurs. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn or visit us at cadsource.com. Thank you for listening to this CADSource production. Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time. This episode exists because of CADSource. CADSource is your content team. You know how many business leaders need help communicating their story? That's what we do. Content strategy, creation, and distribution for business leaders. This provides opportunities, relationships, and a platform for you and your business. Why do we do this? Because at CADSource, we exist to help you create and share amazing content. And yes, you should have a podcast. We'll help you. Learn more by visiting cadscontent.com.